What is up, you guys? Welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, just welcome. My name is Gemma Jade, but today I'm doing something just a little bit different. A lot of you have been asking me for my paranormal stories, so I was going to do, like my encounters, like I do the listener encounters, and I had one story that I wrote for a magazine article that I turned it into, like, instead of just freely telling it like I'm going to do the rest of them, I decided to write it out for them. So I thought we would have a little scary short story in honor of Halloween. I hope you guys like it. And yeah, let's get started. Ever since I was a little girl, back to the very first memory I have, I've been able to see, hear, and sense spirits. Yes, I'm speaking now of the spirits of the dead. People who have died and yet remained either still in this realm or in between here and there. I don't know why I've been chosen, but at 38 years old, I finally stopped being terrified and started seeking answers. If I wrote about every single encounter I have had over the last 34 years that I can remember, I would probably be able to write at least a trilogy, but more than likely it would be an ongoing thing, like the Encyclopedia Britannica with their many volumes and books with impossible amounts of pages. Here is one story that sticks out much more than the others. It starts when I was about 8 years old. My parents had just divorced and I got to stay with my dad and my sister, who was my only friend. She went to live with my mom. My father and I were moving into a new apartment on the other side of the town we'd lived in, just the two of us. This was especially frustrating for me because I would have to switch schools. I was in the 4th grade by this time and it had been hard enough for me to make the handful of friends I had in the school I was in. Middle school is where all the cliques start, and I was too awkward for all of that. I was always sort of a leader. I refused to follow people, and that doesn't bode well with the popular and mean girls. I went my own way. I did my own thing. It also didn't help me that I always had my head in a book, and whatever I was reading at the time was far more advanced than the summer reading lists the schools handed out. I was strange. I was different. I didn't fit in with anyone, and I was a very lonely kid because of it. None of this really mattered at all, though, because when you're 8 years old, you go where your parents or your parent brings you. You don't have a choice. I didn't have a choice. Finally, the day to move had arrived. My father and I loaded some things in his little pickup truck and drove over to our new apartment. I loved it right away because it was an old 3-story house and it was painted bright pink. We lived in the second house from the corner of a small dead-end street, maybe 10 houses on the street, and that's being generous. I noticed right away at the end of this street there was a huge gate. Behind it, some sort of large wooded area. Note to self, I thought, I gotta explore those woods the first chance I get. I imagined finding a large rock somewhere out in the middle of the woods, perhaps a rotted log where I could sit and read my books in private with nobody bothering or badgering me. I must have been daydreaming. Suddenly, I realized there were 2 girls about my age standing right in front of me, introducing themselves. We'll just call them Fiona and Sophia because they're irrelevant to the story. I said hello and told them my name as I stood awkwardly holding a giant box of books in both hands. They giggled and asked what was in the box. I told them it was my books. And so it began. The incessant teasing, being called nerd and bookworm and egghead. All of those ridiculous but hurtful for a kid to hear all the time names kids call other kids to make themselves feel better. Once school started, which was just a few weeks off, they would tell everyone that I was a nerd or a dork, and the teasing would begin all over again. I excused myself as luckily my father had called me into the apartment right at that moment, and I had an excuse to go inside. I roamed the large apartment and found my bedroom right away. The walls were painted bright pink like the outside of the house, and it had this closet that stuck out from the wall a little bit, like an armoire but made of wood and attached to the wall. I walked into the huge bathroom and saw a giant clawfoot tub. My dad came in and told me that was his favorite part about the whole place. He said it was the same tub from when the house was built in 1935. This was 1991, and that seemed like a very long time ago. The one thing I noticed as I finished exploring the place and went back into my pink bedroom to unpack some of my things, the house had soul. I could feel the energy in the air. The hairs all on my body tingled, and it felt like an electric shock anytime I went near the wooden armoire or the clawfoot tub. See, by this time I was used to these feelings. These were the feelings of the good memories of the people who have come and gone through the apartment in all of its years standing there. Not spirits, you see, but just people. The memories we create, both good and bad, stay in the walls and objects left behind. The armoire, while a part of the wall and not technically left behind, held the energy of the little girl who used it before me. There were several of them in the bright pink room, of that I was sure. Of course, the walls had a fresh coat of paint, and just by putting my hand up against them and closing my eyes, I could clearly see in my mind's eye my dad lovingly painting the first stroke of the new pink on top of the old faded color. Clairsentience, as it's called, came very naturally to me, and all of this was pretty normal. It was like watching a movie in my head. The same would be for when I knew a spirit was around me. I hadn't ever been able to see one yet, not at this point in my life, but I would see images very clearly in my head of what the spirit had looked like in life and what had happened to them. Sometimes the visions would be scary, and that's how I would know something evil and bad was around me. This is when I would usually go to sleep with my parents. I'd been so busy unpacking and going through my things, I hadn't noticed another surprise my dad had for me. Before the divorce, my sister and I had bunk beds. She was older, so she always slept on the top bunk, and I stayed on the bottom. Well, instead of keeping the bunk beds up or just getting rid of the top bunk and leaving me with a normal bed, like just the bottom, my father decided to get rid of the bottom bunk, and that way underneath my bed was a really large open space. A space he knew I would love to sit under and read. At night, sometimes I would put a sheet up and sit underneath there with my flashlight just reading. It felt like having another room altogether there under my big bed. Once we made a few more trips back to the old place, we finally had all of our stuff to move into the new pink house. I was so happy. I loved that it was just me and my dad. On the opposite corner where the main road was, there was a little Italian restaurant, and my dad called them and ordered us a pizza and some sandwiches. He asked me if I was up for running across the street and picking everything up. I buy, you fly. That was one of my dad's favorite sayings. It always made me giggle as I would imagine flying like a little pixie wherever it was he wanted me to go. Fairies have been somewhat of a lifelong obsession for me, but that's another story altogether. When the 20 or so minutes had passed and the food was supposed to be ready, I headed over the 30 steps or so to this restaurant. I must admit I was nervous about running into those mean girls again. As a psychic kid who was odd enough already, adding on top I'm a Pisces as well, I avoided confrontation at all costs. I still do to this day, only now I know this comes from my Libra moon as well. Anyway, I went across the street and didn't see the girls anywhere. I went inside, picked up the food, and headed back across the street and a few steps to my front door. That's when I heard it. It was like a wild animal screaming at the top of its lungs. Whether in hunger or pain, I didn't know. I know, though, it was absolutely terrifying as we lived in a big city in northern New Jersey. The most wildlife I had ever encountered were squirrels, raccoons, and maybe a stray rat here and there if I was so unlucky as to have to walk around on garbage day. I turned my head and focused. The screech was coming from that wooded area behind the gate at the end of the dead end side of the street. I ran inside and didn't look back. I expected my father to have heard the screeching or howl, whatever it was, but he didn't say anything, so neither did I. We ate our food and went to bed. The first night in the new apartment was peaceful and relaxing. I was having the visions again, but this time more vivid and of a little girl. The girl who lived here before me, I was sure. She was giggling in my room, running her hand through what I sensed were all the new dresses she had gotten in that wooden armoire. Just as I started to drift off to sleep, though, something new happened. Something new and something terrifying, too. She looked directly at me and began to speak. Hi, I'm Claire. What's your name? I opened my eyes and immediately ran to go sleep in my dad's room. I'll try to make this ridiculously long story shorter here and save you all of the sordid details of my life at this new middle school and my new 4th grade class. It was hell. I'll leave it at that. Kids can be really cruel. Ever since the night Claire had turned and spoke to me, the night when she was a vision, but not, as she knew I could see her and obviously wanted to make friends, she was all I thought about. Every day after school, I would walk the 5 or 6 blocks home and make myself a snack while I did my homework and waited for my dad to get home. After this, I would go in my room and close my eyes and hang out with Claire. I had been doing this for weeks, ever since my second night in the house when she turned to me again and started nonchalantly speaking to me about how her daddy had brought her all of those new dresses she couldn't wait to wear to school. I'd stopped reading under my bed by now and spent all of my free time there in my room with my eyes closed, having conversations with this other young girl. A girl, I might add, I knew was deceased. She knew she was dead too. It was like it never came up. It was just something we both knew and accepted. It was also strange because I was physically in my room with all of my things and yet in her room in my mind with her. Though they were one and the same, they were different. It was like I was crossing over into some other realm or something. Like some unseen portal had been opened and now I could access this other pink room, which was still my room, but it was Claire's room, by just closing my eyes. Since starting my odd friendship with her, I hadn't been seeing any other visions. No warnings of this person getting hurt or that person having an accident, which is what I would normally see before I met Claire. I had never even known who the other people in the visions were, let alone how to reach out and connect with them. I just knew they were real, and what I was seeing happening to them was either really about to happen or already had. I was too young and inexperienced to make any kind of distinction. Claire and I would laugh in my mind and talk telepathically and even play every day. This went on for months. I'd moved into the apartment with Dad in the big pink house at the end of August. By the time November rolled around, all I did was hang out with Claire. My father wasn't too worried because it had always been normal for me to retreat to my room and sit in the closet and read all by myself. I would escape into a world of books. This was so much better, though, because this was somehow real. One day, though, when I went under my bed and closed my eyes, Claire was crying, sitting there on the floor right in front of me. Before I could ask her what was wrong, though, I felt something touch my face. I jumped and opened my eyes, and there she was. She was right there under my bed with me. I could not only see her, but feel her breath on my face. I could hear her out loud, and not just in my mind as she wept. I probably could have wiped her tears away had I thought to, just to reassure myself she was tangible and I wasn't losing my mind. I asked her out loud what was wrong. She shook her head and spoke telepathically. Like this, she said. I just nodded in agreement and asked her again, using my inside voice, what was wrong and why she was crying. She said she wanted to show me something. I followed her out from under my bed and into the chilly night air. It wasn't quite dark yet, but it was cold. My dad wasn't home yet, so I figured I could be out for a little while without leaving a note. She started walking towards the gated wooded area that I had gone out of my way to stay away from since the night I heard whatever that was, shriek or howl like that. She took my hand and reassured me it would be okay. Nothing to fear because she was with me and would protect me. It never occurred to me at that age to ask her what exactly I would need protection from. We slipped under the large gate and started walking a little trail deeper into the woods. I followed along diligently, ever the loyal friend, never asking questions for fear of rejection from the spirit who had become my only friend. She had been laughing and even dancing now, playfully humming a tune out loud the whole time. I didn't even notice when she stopped crying and became so cheerful. I also didn't realize this was all meant to distract me. We were talking out loud now, and I stopped and asked her where we were going. I told her I was cold and my dad would be very worried as I was sure he was home by now. I hadn't left a note, I explained. Oh, don't worry about that. You'll be back in your bedroom in no time, she said. This is when the entire atmosphere changed. I realized we were standing in the middle of a large circle of stones, and there were weird things hanging from the trees, branches tied together and made into weird shapes, hanging from ropes down from all the trees. Her voice had changed as well. Close your eyes. And it was that, don't know how to explain it. She demanded it in a very cold voice and somewhat evil tone. I was terrified but did as I was told. It was like a flash of light, and there I was. I was standing in that other place again. The place where Claire had come from. I heard screaming and looked over, and there it was. I couldn't believe what I was witnessing. It was a group of teenagers dressed in black cloaks chanting, and in the middle of the circle was a large alley cat. They were devil worshippers, and they were sacrificing this animal to Satan in the hopes of conjuring a demon. I knew all of this instinctively, and though the air had shifted and I knew I was no longer there in my realm, or whatever you want to call it, with Claire, I wasn't exactly in the woods with the teenagers either. I was somewhere in between. I heard the chanting get louder and the cat scream. Then there was nothing but silence. I watched as all of the teenagers took off running at the sight of something I couldn't yet see. I wish I could say I never got the chance to see it, but that would be a lie. It was some kind of monster, some horrific creature from hell, a demonic beast who was out for blood. It had been conjured and called forth, and it was going to claim what rightfully belonged to it, a human soul. The teenagers were long gone by now, and it was just me and this thing. It looked right at me. This should have been impossible, I thought, as I was only kind of remote viewing, if you will. I was actually still in the woods in 1991 with my spirit friend Claire. The thing's eyes flashed a bright green and it screamed at me. I took off running. I realized much later on that the scream I heard that first night in the house wasn't of the alley cat. Oh no, no, it was of this beast thing. It had been suddenly unleashed long ago and now roamed the woods at night looking for its sacrifice. Suddenly I felt my body jerk quickly, and before I knew what had happened, I was back in the woods with Claire, both my mind, spirit, and body. I looked at Claire in fear and horror and asked her why she had just shown me that. She smiled at me, her teeth now pointed and her eyes flashing that same sickening green as the demon just moments before. Suddenly there was this foul stench of rotted flesh and sulfur in the air. She opened her mouth and screamed. That's all I can remember. I awoke to the sound of my father calling my name from somewhere close by. I was too weak, cold, and also scared to call back. I let out a pathetic, "Daddy, help," which I'm sure he wouldn't have heard had he been right next to me. Suddenly I noticed how cold I was. When I woke up again, I was at home in my bed. My dad was standing over me with a look of concern on his face. That was a look I knew well. My dad was always concerned with his weird daughter who talked about spirits, ghosts, and the dead all the time, and who never had any real friends. Only the kind he called imaginary, if he only knew the half of it. I never told my dad or anyone else what happened to me that day, and eventually the memory faded a little bit at a time. It never went away completely, mind you. I mean, how could it? As I got older and had experience after experience with spirits and ghosts and even a negative entity here and there, I finally realized what had happened. I was becoming possessed. Claire had been a demon unleashed in the woods behind the big pink house several decades before I lived there. It must have been roaming those woods just waiting. My psychic light must have been visible to it somehow from the first night when I went to get that food. That's why it howled. Being demonic and having knowledge beyond what we can ever understand, it knew I was clairvoyant and clairsentient. It gave me Claire as a playmate, and had it not been for my father looking for me that night and showing up right when he did, I probably would have either been possessed or killed. I'm not sure which one. People always say these things can't hurt you, but I know they can. Like I said, I could fill several volumes of books with my personal stories and encounters alone, and I will give you guys more videos in listener encounters style. We lived in that apartment for about 5 years after that, and I never saw Claire or the demon thing again. Never heard it either. To be fair, this is when I started learning to block my light and stop my psychic senses from just picking things up without me reaching for them. I learned to control it to the best of my ability, at least. I've gotten better at this over the years, and I do know how to protect myself now. I often wonder, though, if that demon attached itself to me somehow, at least a little bit. I've had far more positive encounters with friendly and well-meaning entities since that day way back in 1991. However, I know how to reach out now and also how to turn it off. I've learned to not blindly follow those things in which I don't understand. Most importantly, though, through the years, I have experienced both good and bad due to my psychic abilities. I still wonder if someday I'll close my eyes and I'll be there, back in those woods at the end of the dead-end road, a few steps away from my beloved big pink house. The woods are still there, somehow managing to stay standing despite all the condos and shopping malls, parking lots, and coffee shops that have since sprung up all around that tiny little street. The big pink house is still there too. I wonder if the old wooden armoire and the claw tub are still there. I wonder if the walls in the bedroom are still pink. I wonder if the little girl I've seen playing outside a time or two when I happen to have driven by has a friend named Claire. A special friend who will one day take her for a walk down memory lane in those creepy woods nearby the house. Guys, that is my first encounter with a demon. Please give this video a big thumbs up if you enjoyed it, if you enjoyed spending this time with me. Also, spread the love by sharing this video. Subscribe if you haven't already. I don't think you'll be disappointed. Please do me a huge favor and check out the description box, not just for links, but also for information. If you have any encounters with the supernatural and or paranormal, you will find my email in the description box, GemmaJadeParanormal@gmail.com. Also, there will be links to the live streams, Campfire Stories, on Friday nights on Missing Persons and Mysteries with the panel. We have guests on, all different kinds. I can't even explain it. Gonna have to come in and see. And the information for that is in the description box. Sunday night Fireside Chat starts at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Things and Stuff and Things with Stemma. And Wednesday night right here on this channel is Oracle readings with either me and Steve or just me. Come on in and see what that's about as well. I would really love to have you. Justice for Caleb Smith. I'm hoping to get an updated 2-hour live interview with April Arrington once some things clear up for her. So right now I'm just going to put the old one in, and the link for the GoFundMe, for the billboard, the private investigator, the attorneys, whatever it is that they need to do to get some attention on Caleb's case. And also PayPal and Patreon for financial donations, and my Amazon link a lot of you have been asking for. Also, my book is out, so I will put the link for this for the Kindle and paperback edition from Amazon, the affiliate link in there. So if you order through that, it's the affiliate for the book. And thank you to everyone who bought the book either on Kindle or paperback. You know how much it means to me. This is a dream come true. The little girl who used to read in the closet or read under her bed or read in the middle of the woods and never had any friends. Books were my friends. And yeah. So, all right, enough about me. I love you guys. Please be kind to both to each other and to yourselves. It costs nothing to be a kind, decent, nice human being, right? Always go in grace. Have your best day. Have your best night. And I'll see you next time. Bye.